Hi everyone, welcome to this show and tell of how I run Call of Cthulhu scenarios using Roll20. Now this is going to be full of spoilers for a scenario called The Mummy of Pemberley Grange, written by Alan Carey and Nick Holland. So if you're a player who wants to play that game sometime, just don't watch this video, because there are going to be things I say that are going to spoil that for you. But if you might want to run that game sometime, or you're thinking, what are the tips and techniques I could use in Roll20 that would help me to run a nice, tight scenario that's fun for the keeper and the players, well, there are a few tips and techniques that I've learned over time that I've jammed together all in this one game, and I'm going to show you a bunch of those today. And I have to also say, you know, there isn't a lot of real innovation in what I'm going to show you. It's a lot of just gluing together several different creative ideas. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. So, by the way, I do recommend this scenario, The Mummy of Pemberley Grange. It is fun, it is terrifying, and I think keepers and players would enjoy it. And that's why I think it's such a good example for showing you how to run a game. So what I'll do next is I'll switch over to my Roll20 screen. Once you're starting to run the game with your players, what I like about this scenario in particular is they give you a map, and the map is for a large manor house called Pemberley Grange, and that winds up being a really great battle map, if you will, although battle, I use that term somewhat loosely. It's a great map for your players to use as they navigate around the house. And of course I couldn't have as much fun as I do or run the games that I do without my players, so thanks to them. So overall, you know, I find when I want to run a game that only lasts one evening, a one-shot, a single map is really good. And there are lots of things I like to do to kind of streamline the play and to make it fun and cinematic for the players. So I'll show you a few examples. I'm going to zoom back out to show you the entire map all at once so you can get the keeper's eye view. And we'll start with some of the basic things that I think most Roll20 game masters already know. And that's to add some visual richness while you're starting your narrative using pictures that you can keep off to the side of your map, so that when you start to introduce characters, for example, if you have pictures that you've thrown onto your map and you press Shift-Z, you can have those NPC pictures pop right up and take over the whole screen. So in this case, I introduce a few characters in the opening narrative for my game, and as I go through each one, I just make sure that that picture takes over the screen so that my players can understand, well, these are probably prominent NPCs. And in fact, in my last game I added this dog, who I named Seth, after an Egyptian god, not necessarily Seth Korkowski, the noted game master, but you know, that's just a happy coincidence. But I added this dog to the game because I really wanted players to wonder, hey, what's going to happen with this dog? And I wanted them to worry about that a little bit. And I use that same technique as I'm introducing new characters, or if there are significant moments in the game. What I've started to do, because I like that 1920s silent film style, is I've even used something like Google Slides to make, you know, just big black rectangular cards that introduce, you know, either important quotes from the different characters or a certain scene or something like that. It really is just nice the way it makes the video layout a little more dynamic and gives the player something interesting to see other than, you know, some tiny bit of a static map. So that's the first tip. Now, the second tip that I'll share with you has to do with how the descriptions for the different spaces, how you can kind of streamline those to make it a little bit easier for you as a game master to just tell people about the rooms that they're in. And again, these are tips that I borrowed from others, so you may already know some of these. But I'll use an example. here, which I think will make a lot of sense to you. So when I normally introduce a game, there's some narrative that's a part of that, and then the players might move into a certain room. Let's say they want to go into the hall here to talk to Mason. Well, each time they go into the hall, I really want to set the scene, and I don't want to do it just out of my imagination, although I can. When I think about it in advance, what does the room look like, what does it smell like, and so on, I really want those details to be captured in a way. So I create these little macros with descriptions. In this case, it describes the entrance hall of Pemberley Grange. It's a formal greeting room, imposing in a way that says, "Welcome to those that belong, and go away to those that do not," etc., etc. And so that's a really nice way for me to orient players to the space. And so how do I do that? Well, this tip I saw, which was quite helpful, had to do with creating macros that contain the description. So I keep a GM tool here, in this case for the entire map, if you will. And when I go into that character sheet, I just have different attributes and abilities for the different spaces. So you can see here, this is how I describe the hall, and I just use desk and then a whole bunch of narrative text, and I say show it in the macro bar here, and that's how I get it to appear down in the bar below. And originally, unfortunately, I had used a different technique, which was to use the macro toolbar up here and create a macro to do the description, but the macros are isolated when you do them this way only to the game, and they can't be copied from one game to another. And sometimes I'll run the same scenario for several groups of players, and I'll want to recopy the maps and so on. And so the technique that works much better than copying a game and losing all the macros is just to make a player that has all the macros in the abilities and attributes, as you can see. And then you can use the Roll20 character vault to move a character with a bunch of macros from one game to another. So I won't show you how to do that. I think there are plenty of other videos out there about using the character vault. But I think that technique works really well for keeping track of the things you want to tell the players in each of the different spaces. While we're zoomed in here on one particular room, I'll just add another couple of quick ideas. The first is, when you have some of these maps, if you want to have doors and you want to have players lock doors, you can certainly find very easily little icons that you would add, and just put them on either on the map layer or on the object layer. And when someone says, "Oh, I locked that door," you can move that right over to show that the door has been locked. And sometimes as well, you'll note in a few places I have on the Game Master layer in rooms, if I think there's something special and my players detect it using like a spot hidden or something like that, I will have, say, this little symbol of the Eye of Horus, is just a carving on the wall. I'll note to myself, oh, when they see that, I should, show them on the screen what it looks like. So if there are little objects that are relevant in each room, I make sure that I have a little visual indicator for myself so I don't forget to show that. Let's zoom back out on the map, and you'll also note here I do a similar kind of thing in different rooms. So for example, there's a sarcophagus that you don't really see when you join the game the first time. If you were a player, this whole space would look empty. But when the game begins and the players are about to walk into this room with the sarcophagus, of course I move that, and I move the mummy to the map layer so the players can see those things. But I try to keep them hidden until the moment when it's appropriate for the game. Now we'll zoom back out and I'll show you just a couple of other fun things that I do that are useful for efficiency. One of those is related to puzzles. So I really like adding puzzles to a game if I can, but not puzzles that are so challenging that they'll take tons of time and slow down the game. So in this game, for example, there's a point at which you have to do a translation of some text from Arabic to English, and my character's role to see if they're able to do that. And if they are able to do that, what I actually gave them was a set of little sheets of paper that I just moved around to different parts on the board. I'll show you one example here. So I was able to take this piece maybe and put it over here, or if I exposed this piece and put it on the token layer and say this piece on the token layer, I moved them all around the board, and then I said to the players, well, go and find a spot that's clear and take all the different pieces and assemble them, and that's the answer to the puzzle you're trying to solve. Now, they'd already solved the puzzle in a way with their roll, but this just gave them kind of a fun activity, and they could help each other. You know, the trick for this, of course, is with these tokens, just make them controllable by all players, and then everyone can help. You know, they can find a clear space on the board, put all the pieces together, and then ultimately read the puzzle. So that's kind of a fun thing. You could get really cruel by, you know, reorienting the puzzles or making the pieces all very complex and so on. And again, that's just a tip that I picked up from someone else, and I'm showing you here how that can be blended alongside some of the other things that you would do when you're creating a game, and just adding new items of visual interest. Speaking of visual interest, I like to do things like, you know, have very strong graphics at key moments of the game. So not just pictures of things, but, you know, you might have a special effect that occurs at some point. And there are plenty of PNGs out there on the internet that have, you know, blood splatter, or, you know, chopped up, you know, sections of wood, or crushed stone, or whatever else you think your players might need to do. And you can add those to the edges of the game, and then just press the picture and press Shift Z and bring that up. And then the last thing that I'll mention here is just this idea of being prepared with additional NPCs if needed. And so this takes a little bit of planning ahead. But for example, you can see that I have a bunch of cultists, tokens for cultists, that is, along the top of this map. And I also have a bunch of tokens for police officers on the edge of my map. And why do I do that? Well, there are points in this game when it is possible, for example, that you might just need a bunch of tokens for a certain battle, or, you know, to dissuade your players from going a certain direction, for example. And if a bunch of tokens just pop up out of nowhere, and you know, they make you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't go that way. Well, that kind of helps you guide the story a little bit. And so I like to get some of these ready if necessary, and just keep them on the game master layer, and then when needed, you know, you can take several of them and move them into the token layer as soon as necessary. Or, you know, there's a point at which in the game I have a kitchen in this particular plan, and it just so happens that there's a telephone in the kitchen. It's the only telephone in the entire house. And I thought to myself, well, what happens if my players call the police? If the police are going to show up, how many am I going to need to maybe take on the army of cultists outside the door, or to, you know, influence the cultists to run away, for example? And so I have just some NPC policemen ready to go, just in case. So these are just some ideas or tips that I've thrown together into one single map that really puts everything in one place, so that when you need to run a game, you're able to just look in the different portions of the map and see these little triggers. Oh, I'm supposed to show a picture here, right? Or, oh, I'm supposed to show a quote here, or this is where the puzzle goes, or, oh, there's the icon that needs to come up for this part of the game when the players are in a certain room, and I need to move that from the game layer to the object layer, for example. So all of these things together can really make it fun to have an entire kind of cinematic experience, even just on a single map. And of course, don't forget the features like the jukebox in Roll20 and all the playlists you can create for either different chapters of your story or different spaces that your players move into and out of. So I hope this has been helpful for you, this little show and tell of different kinds of objects, techniques, practices you can add to a map in Roll20 when you're doing, well, Call of Cthulhu, which is a cosmic horror role-playing game, or any kind of game. You can put all these things together and really make for a nice, rich experience for your players, and of course a fun experience for yourself as the game master. Thanks for watching this video. Take care and enjoy your games.